Minnesota Senator Al Franken, he's facing a lot of pressure by both parties after being accused of sexual harassment. A second one came out earlier today. So joining us now, we'll debate all the big stories in politics. Our friend of the show, Emma Vigeland, politics producer of The Young Turks, and of course our good friend Jack Hunter, editor over at Rare Politics. Let's get things kicked off, guys. Of course, I mentioned another woman came forward this morning saying Al Franken touched her inappropriately back in 2010. So Emma, let's start with you. Agree or disagree? Al Franken, he should resign.
That's a tough one, but I do think now that the second woman has come forward, it's probably time for him to resign. In this climate, it's really difficult for anyone who's done predatory things like this to stay in office, and that's really for the better. The biggest irony is that Donald Trump has been accused of more than, I think, 15 women of touching them inappropriately, yet he's calling out Al Franken on Twitter. This isn't a right or left issue. This is a predatory issue, and where men are abusing their power with women who are below them or who they think they can take advantage of. So we have to talk about this in a bipartisan way. Franken should resign, and if you're calling on Franken to resign, you should also probably call on Trump to resign.
Okay, so we'll stick with Franken. I mean, unless, Jack, you want to say President Trump should resign as well, because at least Franken has said, you know, listen, I apologize for everything. President Trump at least has said his accusers are, you know, doing this for the attention. It's not true, any of that. But do you think that Franken should go for these two instances?
I do. Look, when these accusations are made and it's one person, you know, it's of concern and the accusation should be taken seriously. When it's more than one person, it's multiple accusations, that's when it takes on a different form, I think. I think even the Washington Post writer, the self-identified feminist, who I think sort of embarrassingly said, I think her name's Kate Harding, said that, you know, yes, he did this thing, possibly is accused of this thing, but he's a Democrat and we should keep him. Even she said if there are multiple accusers, she would change her mind on that. Yeah, I think we need to look at this even more credibly, more seriously now that there are multiple accusations. And at the same time, yes, there is a huge double standard that Donald Trump, who's been accused of more and worse things, is acting like this isn't a big deal, you know, speaking out against Al Franken on Twitter. There's a huge double standard there, no matter how you cut it.
Yeah, and that second accusation against Al Franken happened while he was a senator.
Yep,
so a big
point.
difference there.
Good point.
Moving on to Roy Moore. He is down by 8 percentage points in the last poll to Democrat Doug Jones, as more women, of course, are accusing now him of sexual abuse. But some say those polls aren't really accurate because people don't necessarily want to admit that they are going to vote for Moore. So, Jack, we'll start with you. Agree or disagree? Moore is still going to win this election.
You know, I do have right-leaning friends that think he might still pull it out. I'm still in the column that thinks he probably won't, but it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. I think the polling that shows that Doug Jones is, you know, there's a gap there and Doug Jones is in the lead. I think a lot of people, you know, the general election with Donald Trump taught us this. A lot of people will tell pollsters one thing and then vote another way. And yeah, a lot of people are willing, more supporters, to say, well, you know what, this is just a hit job by the establishment. This is a hit job by the media, and are doubling down on their support of Moore. It will be interesting to see on Election Day for the special election how many people have told pollsters one thing, go in there, pull the lever for Moore, and maybe he does come out with an upset. I do think it's so bad. It's, you know, we saw evangelical leaders over the weekend actually speaking out against Moore, so that's something. It will be interesting to see how it plays out. And I think Moore loses, but it's certainly, you know, not something that anybody can say absolutely one way or the other.
And Emma, what do you think?
Once again, I agree with Jack here. I think that the polls are too wide of a margin based on, I guess, embarrassment bias. That's not a real thing, but we can coin it here. There was a similar thing that happened with Trump in the general election, but I think it's more that along the margins during the general election in swing states, he pulled out more. But that was based on the same thing, that embarrassment. People were embarrassed to say they were voting for him, but they were like, I'm not voting for Hillary Clinton. It could be the same thing with Roy Moore. Let's not forget that Alabama is deep red, and if there's any state where a Republican repeatedly accused of child molestation could win, it would be in Alabama because they are heavily partisan. And I'm worried that someone like Doug Jones, who in any just world would be the senator from Alabama, someone who prosecuted the KKK, won't be able to pull it off just based on those partisan lines. And also, as Jack touched on, a deep disdain for the mainstream media that the media does have to own. And even if the voters in Alabama are deep red, you still have to appeal to them, and they don't trust the institution of the media at all.
All right, let's move on to President Trump. Of course, he's come out condemning Al Franken's actions, tweeting, calling him Al Frankenstein, but he hasn't been quick to discuss Roy Moore whatsoever. Now, of course, Sarah Huckabee Sanders says, President Trump has said he wants to get out of the race if the allegations are true, but Trump hasn't talked about him whatsoever. So let's go to our next question. Emma, let's stick with you. Trump isn't condemning Roy Moore because he's actually fearful that his past allegations are going to come back.
I don't think there's some grand scheme. I think Donald Trump talks about things when it's convenient for him and when it's not, and he's more concerned with LeVar Ball, I think, than the Roy Moore scandal. It's really unbelievable. LeVar Ball versus Donald Trump, it's like the Super Bowl of trolls. I just think he doesn't care about hypocrisy, and part of why he won was just crowd surfing and saying what was advantageous to him and not saying what was disadvantageous to him. He knows when something is politically advantageous and when it isn't, and that hypocrisy, he doesn't really even care that he's hypocritical. I'm sure if you were to corner him on it, he wouldn't really have an answer.
Right. Jack, do you think President Trump is worried that he's going to open up the whole conversation all over again, that he got past the Access Hollywood tape and have moved on from locker room talk, but talking about Moore is just going to open it all back up again?
I do think that's in the back of his mind, and it points to the hypocrisy we're discussing right now. I think that's been the most interesting thing about all these revelations in right and left, Republican and Democrat, looking at their own people in their own parties. I do think Donald Trump remembers those accusations to the degree that they're true, certainly would remember that, and doesn't want to open that can of worms as it pertains to Roy Moore, which makes it more interesting that he would even say anything about Al Franken. But that shows you just how shameless he is in not only a partisan way, but a hypocritical way. Look, you see a lot of people on the left right now, there have been multiple pieces talking about, do we need to have a reckoning as it concerns Bill Clinton? Defended by Democrats and many for years, and it is kind of indefensible in light of the Harvey Weinstein scandal and all the things that happened, Al Franken, Roy Moore, and here we are. Donald Trump doesn't seem to care about the hypocrisy. He's a shameless partisan. He's a shameless hypocrite. And yeah, I think in the back of his mind, he doesn't want to revisit maybe some of his own accusations. I think that's accurate.
And Jack, that leads us to our next question. It doesn't appear Democrats or Republicans are immune to this. New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat, recently said Bill Clinton should have resigned because of the Monica Lewinsky scandal. So do you agree or disagree more Democrats will be coming out and distancing themselves from the Clintons?
Well, they should. And, a lot of my conservative friends are sort of lampooning the left and saying, well, too little, too late. And I agree with that. But I also agree with, this is a serious issue. It cuts across left and right lines. And it's better now for Gillibrand or any other prominent Democrats to come out and say this is unacceptable. Bill Clinton does not belong in polite society, however you want to phrase it. He's an ex-president. I don't know what that looks like. But this is wrong. I mean, these are accusations of rape. These are accusations that are far worse than anything Al Franken has been accused of right now. We're talking about whether he should resign. So, yeah, and I think Gillibrand in particular, who's dealing with sexual abuse cases in the military and sort of has her finger on the button, not only as a woman, but, with that directly as it relates to military issues. I think it means something that she said that about Bill Clinton, and I hope other Democrats follow suit. They should.
What do you think, Emma?
What are your thoughts?
Well, Gillibrand's really interesting to me. I think she's clearly positioning herself for a run in 2020, and distancing herself from the Clintons and from that brand is politically expedient for her because Hillary Clinton actually polls more unpopular than Donald Trump. So I think this is a part of her greater strategy. She's also had a way more progressive voting record than almost anyone besides Bernie Sanders, but that's very recent. So I think this is a part of a long-term strategy positioning herself for 2020. But I do agree that Bill Clinton's actions, if they were done in this current context, would not be met with kind of the brushing off of the shoulder that we do because it happened in the 90s. Again, he was president, a longer time ago, so I don't think it's as relevant, but it's all about timing and it's all about how the conversation was framed. Back then, we weren't having this conversation. If that happened today, I think Bill Clinton would be harpooned, rightfully so, excuse me, because we're more aware now.
Right, and she, of course, according to 538, votes the least out of any other senator in the Senate with President Trump more than anybody else.
That's on purpose.
I think that's on purpose as well, to your point as well. Okay, Emma Vigeland, politics producer over at The Young Turk, and Jack Hunter, editor over at Rare Politics. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Have a good Thanksgiving week, both of you guys.
Thanks.
You too.